Professor publicly insults Karoline Leavitt, but her response shocks everyone. The lecture hall at Stanford University was packed with students, an eclectic mix of aspiring journalists, political science majors, and those just trying to survive another semester. The dim lighting flickered as the projector hummed to life, and a familiar face appeared on the screen. "Good morning, everyone," said Professor Martin Donnelly, leaning against the podium with an exaggerated sigh. "Today, we're talking about how the modern political landscape is floundering." The classroom chuckled at the word. It was typical Donnelly. His delivery often laced with sarcasm and sharp humor, and a penchant for attacking the establishment. The students were familiar with his critiques, especially his scathing remarks on the state of American politics in 2025, a year marked by increasing polarization and social unrest. Political figures had turned social media into their battleground, trading policy for viral moments. "Now, most of you probably think you know the players in today's political game," Donnelly continued, pacing the front of the room with dramatic flair. "You've got the usual suspects, the party insiders, the populist rebels, and of course, those who prefer to create noise rather than substance." A few students nodded knowingly. They had heard this before, the professor's take on the age of post-truth politics, a time when social media influencers had more sway than fact-checkers. But what they didn't expect was the pointed shift in Donnelly's tone. "And speaking of noise, let me introduce someone who's practically become a symbol of the chaos we've come to expect from politicians in the social media age. Karoline Leavitt," he said, clicking the remote to bring up a tweet from Leavitt herself. The tweet read, "Policy? We don't need policy. We need people who know how to fight." The tweet was followed by a series of hashtags that echoed across Twitter in the past few months, stirring up a mix of admiration and disdain. Hashtag Leavitt for the people, hashtag fight not talk, and of course the controversial hashtag cancel the elites. "I mean, look at this," Donnelly smirked. "This is what passes for discourse these days. Forget about understanding policy, let's just fight, right? Let's just throw jabs at the elites and the establishment and call it a day. This is the 2025 political revolution we've been promised." The room grew quieter. Karoline Leavitt, sitting in the back corner, hadn't flinched. As the class's resident conservative voice, Karoline was used to being the target of mockery. But today, Donnelly had gone too far. He had taken a swipe at her political career, but more importantly, her identity as a vocal force against the political class she had once been part of. Professor Donnelly continued, warming to his theme. "It's almost impressive how someone can make a career out of shouting slogans into a microphone. You'd think we were in the midst of a reality show competition, not a serious government. But that's the brand of politics we get now. Where does this all end? Does anyone even care about actual governance anymore?" Karoline's classmates shifted uncomfortably in their seats, watching her for a reaction. They knew her well. Intelligent, fiery, and often a lightning rod for campus debate. They waited to see how she would handle the public insult. After a long moment of silence, Karoline slowly stood up. Her actions were deliberate, her eyes focused. She wasn't one to back down, but this wasn't just about defending herself. It was about making a statement. "Professor Donnelly," Karoline began, her voice calm but cutting, "I'd like to point out something you might have missed in your lecture on how not to be effective in politics." The class went still. Donnelly raised an eyebrow, his earlier smugness quickly replaced with curiosity. The students leaned in, sensing that something big was about to unfold. "First, let me clarify something," Karoline continued, her tone steady but unwavering. "You're right about one thing. 2025 politics are loud, chaotic, and messy. But there's a reason for that. We're not living in the era of traditional politicking anymore, where you can hide behind jargon and a perfectly crafted speech. The political landscape today is personal, it's immediate, it's in the palms of our hands, and it's real-time. The days of waiting for weeks for a Senate hearing to unfold on C-SPAN are long gone. People want answers now." The students were listening intently. Karoline's argument was coherent, but her delivery, sharp, precise, was more than just political rhetoric. She was dissecting the current system, and more importantly, why the very mechanics of politics had shifted. Sure, you want to talk about governance, she said, locking eyes with Donnelly. But how about the fact that policy in 2025 is a conversation between influencers and reality TV stars more often than it's a debate in Congress? Let's not pretend that your old-school notion of political decorum matters when the most influential voices on the internet are canceling everyone they disagree with. You're sitting up here in your academic tower, pretending like you've got all the answers, while the world's changing right beneath your feet. Professor Donnelly's face reddened. He opened his mouth to speak but hesitated. Karoline wasn't done. And let's be honest, she added, her voice tinged with sarcasm. The fact that you're here, teaching a class on political discourse, is a perfect example of why we're in the mess we're in. You're operating on a 20th century mindset, assuming that the best politician is the one who can string together the most verbose arguments, when the truth is the best politician in 2025 is the one who can connect with people quickly, directly, and emotionally. A few students clapped. Karoline had gone beyond defending herself. She just opened a new can of worms, challenging not just Donnelly, but the very framework of political thought that many professors had clung to for decades. She turned to face the class, her voice softer now, but no less confident. You see, Professor, there's something you don't get. The political elite has failed us. Whether it's your liberal pundits or my fellow conservatives, the establishment is crumbling because the people no longer trust them. We want action, not just pretty speeches. We want people who act in real time, not those who only react from the safety of their ivory towers. Donnelly looked around the room, and for the first time in years, he was lost for words. His carefully curated lecture had backfired. What had started as a mocking joke at Karoline's expense had turned into a spirited discussion about the direction of modern politics. Well, Donnelly muttered, I suppose I've been bested. Perhaps there's more to your argument than I originally thought. Karoline smiled. It's not about winning, Professor. It's about understanding the game we're all playing. She looked over at her classmates. And trust me, the game's not about policies written in dusty textbooks. It's about real, unfiltered connection. The bell rang and the class filed out, leaving Professor Donnelly standing at the front of the room, trying to digest the sharp critique from a student who had turned the tables on him. Karoline, however, wasn't interested in the last word. She had made hers, and it had just shaken the foundations of how they all viewed politics in 2025.